Bueno, muchas gracias. Como menciona la maestra Sandra, soy Iván Osorio, egresado de la carrera industrial. Voy a contarles un poco sobre un proyecto que hemos hecho a lo largo de un año y voy a brincar a inglés, porque como está para compartirse en otros países y toda la presentación viene justamente en inglés. So, we have been working on for the past year is based on service design for sustainability and sustainable tourism in Mexico. And this is actually the project that we used as a dissertation, both my colleague Hugo Diaz and myself. And basically, is what are the challenges of using public land sustainably in Mexico, creating sustainable tourism and outdoor tourism, and if service design can help bridge this gap and how that would look like. So first off, where did we start working? We started in the Mexican National Park, specifically the Iztaccíhuatl-Popocatépetl National Park outside Mexico City. Mexico as a country has different regions, and one of the main ones is a central area which has volcanic transversal axis. So we have different mountain ranges, and this is one of the most popular ones for both and more low altitude recreation. So this park has two volcanoes, one active, which is restricted area, and one that is more open and still people are able to climb it. It's 1 hour and a half from Mexico City, and still people, especially Mexican nationals who are city dwellers, think of a national park and think of this. They think of a recreation, more water park, theme park, Six Flags kind of thing. And it's very interesting because in the collective imaginary of people, like, oh yeah, the volcanoes are there, the mountains are there, we know the legend, we know they're there, we see the postcards, but very few people have ever been there. So this is what the expectation is, when the reality is something like this. We have a park with 177,000 acres worth of land, which is understaffed and under budget. And we do not have a park system as such as other places around the world or neighbors to the south or north have. This creates a number of issues and challenges, but it does also create an area of opportunity for people to enjoy this park. It is public land, it is legislated to a certain extent, and that it can be enjoyable, and it has its own potential to be recreative without being this, right? So, this, for example, is the Cascada Patlaco, which is a 30-million-year-old waterfall that comes from the glacier, from the top of the mountain, and is also fed by rainwater, which that rainwater and that weather around these volcanoes dictate much of the weather in the city and cities around. In Mexico and around the world, if you think of mountains, you probably think of this, a more extreme sport of going up and climbing and being on the summit. And this is how the tourism department and tourism industry usually brands this park. And it's okay, there's a very special niche for this, which is valid. But there are also many other users that are overlooked most of the time. And these users can be hikers, campers, families going to eat, young children, school groups, fishing, food. There are many other services that are not included and are not really out there for the people to know about. So we have to make this more inclusive, not just for the elite, athletic, and affluent, because it is an expensive sport, users. This brings to the next part. What happens when a user comes to the park for the first time? There is a broad range of elements that need to be there, and some are and some aren't. In this park, we have at the same time this sign, which is handmade and posted on a tree, and at the same time we have a very modern sign made by the federal government, but it's not standardized. So if a user comes here, the design that is being shown to them, that they're being exposed to, is not coherent and is not efficient. This leads to several other things. When a person arrives here and a user or visitor doesn't know what's happening, where they're going, where he or she is supposed to be going or doing, we start having problems. So we have a lot of accidents that then rescue groups have to invest resources and risk their own personnel to help this. Secondarily, we have also a lot of pets. So people come with their pets because they assume that they can bring their pets. But what's really not known is that bringing a house pet into this type of ecosystem will disbalance the whole ecosystem. Because a dog that is not on the leash will urinate or defecate, and that will then make the local fauna like coyotes or rabbits or other types of animals not cross that border, and it creates a whole mess of ecosystem balance. And finally, a lot of people are using a lot of consumable plastics for their outings. Whether it's going to the top and you have water or juice or any type of packaged good. So again, tools and challenges. In many other areas around the world, we have social networks, we have email, we have internet, we have a website, we have this accessibility to information that allows users to experience what they're going to do beforehand and plan ahead, making them cultured and educated users and having them have a better user experience while in the park. We have tour guides. You can find guides in any library online for many different areas of the world. That is not the case here. The Department of Natural Resources of Mexico, in its current administration, decided to take down both the website and social media for the national park, and only exercising certain prohibitions of use, such as the dogs or such as hunting, which is a bit more common sense, but a lot of things that might seem common sense are not, and the other way around. An example of this is on the main trail, which leads to the summit, the current study made by an independent NGO with the federal government establishes that this trail has a capacity of 85 people per day, and is currently used at approximately 250 people per weekend. So this is an environmental impact. The environmental impact of this is obviously saturated. Why aren't people using other places? Because they don't know about it. Another example, while working with the communities, we found is that there are no trash cans in certain places, and people ask for trash cans. And we asked the community leaders, why don't you have trash cans? And they said because they show up from the city, and instead of just leaving their trash that they're consuming there, they take everything they have with them from their 2-hour road trip and leave it here. So they're importing trash to a place that has no collection system or waste management disposal system. Then also we have the economic impact. These communities around these areas have a lot of heritage and culture and history around food and activities and just the stories of the place and what that means for us as a nation and as a society. However, many of the people who arrive here arrive by tour buses that they find online by international brands. And these tour buses take off from the city. There are enterprises, companies based in the city, which then directly to whatever it is they're going to do and bypass all the local shop owners, all the local vendors. So really the economic impact of this tourism is not being sustainable because it is only going back and forth from the city to the company and not to the park or to the local vendors. These are some of the local vendors. These are people who sell fruits, who sell honey, who sell different types of local grown produce, and they're actually very cheap. And there's also many places who can rent cabins and rent different types of services for the weekend, but these places do not have internet. So the accessibility for these vendors to get their product out, make sure that the service is available to the consumer, is very limited. The next part as a user is safety and logistics. Obviously, there's nationwide, not crisis, but concern over safety, especially in the outdoors. And when we don't have a consistent type of signage and communication with users, people don't know what they're doing or what they're seeing or what they're supposed to be doing, and that raises safety issues. And these tools, or lack thereof, end up disabling the opportunity to create an outdoors community and outdoors culture, which in turn creates a sustainable lifestyle and sustainable tourism economy. These are other examples of what we could be doing and some people are doing. And then finally, the stakeholders. So we've talked about the user, but who are really the stakeholders in this whole phenomenon? We have people like Doña Toñita, who has been there for 45 years selling tacos. Obviously, it's a cash-only business, but they charge $1 for every taco. So when people come up here, they're surprised at how cheap it is and how fresh it is. So there is an economic opportunity to be made here. This is Gaudencio Hernandez, and he's from La Venta. They're a community that started a fishing place with the cabins you saw earlier. But again, they don't have any internet, and they don't have the tools to really negotiate with a bigger industry and be able to capitalize on that. Alpine Police was created, and the Alpine Police was created because of the safety issues, but they are bilingual trained police. So it's another example of things that can be done right that are usually negatively perceived in other areas. So Ar Martinez and her team from Tierra de Volcanes, an NGO promoting mountain culture based in Mexico City. So all these leads us to a very simple map. This is a very simplified version of our system map, where obviously we need transportation, whether it be public, private tours, or private transportation. The user gets there, but the user is only in this part of the map. Right here we have many other things. We have local small vendors, local more set up shops, the tour guides we were talking about, and the park itself, because the park itself is a user that has to be taken care of. And on the more institutional side, we have a government institution, which is Semarnat, that is not really being in control or in communication with any of these stakeholders. We have the safety, which is being taken care of, and the rescue work, which is also done by volunteers. So what we're proposing is Tribu. We are developing Tribu, which is a platform that centralizes all these different concepts. These are small screenshots of what we're doing, and this is already online. The content is being uploaded still, where people can go in and start fighting all these things. All these areas of opportunity that we've identified, we are generating and centralizing content for people to be able to access it from their home before going to the park, such as guidelines and maps that can be downloaded. And then on the midterm, what happens if we can make this into an offline app that people can have on their phone while they're there, and then avoid more people getting lost or injured? Or maybe different types of textile flags and materials that can tell you where you are at the park. Experiences and products. It's also part of the experience to have a relationship with other people in the community. If you see someone with a hat that has this badge, or someone having this little thing around them, then it means you're creating a community, you're creating a culture around it. And on the long term, what happens if we can start to get these people, these vendors, and these institutions to make alliances with Google and do a VR trip of the park for people with limited mobility who can't go there? Or a school in the inner city parts of the metropolitan area that can't afford to take their kids there, but they can teach environmental education through VR. What happens if we give access to these vendors to platforms like Airbnb so they can sell their products to a more higher-end consumer? So basically, it's a project that we believe to be scalable, replicable, and sustainable that can help create this bridge through service design. And this leads to social innovation, which leads to conservation, using business as a force for good in society, and ultimately ends up creating cultural shift for the betterment of these outdoor areas, public land areas. This is where you can find us. Thank you very much.